All right, we're joined by Bob Beers from 98.5 The Sports Hub, the radio analyst for Boston Bruins hockey. I should say long-time radio analyst, as he called the games of Marco Sturm when he was a member of the Boston Bruins when Sturm played here for 5 years. Beers, what were your thoughts when we kind of saw this coming a little bit, but what are your thoughts on Marco Sturm being named the next coach of the Boston Bruins?
Yeah, certainly a lot of rumors here recently. It started to heat up a little bit more. There was a few names that were out there, but Sturm's name seemed to be the one that was constant for a while here. So, look, he doesn't have any head coaching experience in the NHL. He does certainly at the international level and at the American Hockey League level. So, we've seen coaches make that step, when it's time, make that step into the NHL and have a real impact. And that's certainly what they're hoping. And, as far as his style or as far as his thoughts, in terms of how to build a team, that still remains to be seen. I think the press conference next Tuesday, we'll get a better indication then of what his vision is for a team.
Well, it sounds like in reading the press release and statements from Don Sweeney and Marco Sturm, defense is going to be a big part of that. And I would think if you look, as you can tell us, this team from the back end out is basically what it looks like to be the best part of the team on paper.
Well, we certainly thought that going into the season last year, and it was not the case. And actually cost Jim Montgomery his job. I mean, early in the season, they were not good defensively. There were a lot of holes in the defensive game. I think Jeremy Swayman would admit he wants to have a better season here moving forward. He's got the contract now, and he can concentrate on just playing hockey. He had a really good World Championships, which is a nice sign for the Bruins. Defensively as a whole, I think that they still have to add on that back end. I don't think that they're prepared right now to go into the season with maybe the 6 or 7 guys that they had in last year's lineup, that's going to be your lockdown defense. Now, in fairness, they were missing Hampus Lindholm and Charlie McAvoy for the better part of that, late in the season. So those are 2 big boosts coming back into the lineup. I still think that there are a couple of holes that they want to fill, and we'll see how they do that, whether it's in free agency or trades. Or call-ups. So that's still an area. When you talk about team defense, so it's everybody playing together as a unit. That just was not the case for too many parts of last season. There were times where they played well. They were connected as a 5-man group and in goaltending, but way too many times, they were not connected as a unit defensively, and that definitely has to improve.
You're around players all the time, usually when you're doing your job, obviously. When you were around Marco, was any inkling that he might be a head coach someday?
It's hard. We do this exercise once in a while when you sit around and you're talking about players. You say, which player on the team do you think would be a really good head coach? Like Chris Kelly was a guy that I think was a natural that would jump out. He's one of the assistant coaches when he played. But for Marco, he was a pretty quiet guy. Low maintenance, did his job, did it well. I know that he'll forever be linked to the Joe Thornton trade, but he was the guy that really panned out for them throughout that trade. He played well. He scored some huge goals. Big one against Montreal that I remember. A big one. He scored the OT winner at Fenway Park against Philadelphia Flyers, the outdoor game there. So, I mean, a lot of things kind of stand out for him. Did I see him being a coach? That was kind of hard to tell back then, but he's certainly now paid his dues and done a good job where he's been.
With knowing Don Sweeney and Cam Neely and having gone through coaches now, what do you think they want in this next head coach, Marco Sturm?
Well, I think there's always an accountability factor. I think that's got to be high up on their list. Make sure that players are held accountable for, how they play. I think that, when you talk about the Bruins' way of wanting to play, a lot of teams playing with pace now. You have teams that can be physical. But I think we go back to that, what we just talked about earlier, that I think the strength of the team has to be the team defense, and then you build your goal scoring from that. So if that's any indication, I think Don Sweeney preaches that and talks about that a lot. That's why last year was just so disappointing in the way that they defended all season long, or most of the season. So I would think that that's going to be number one on the list. Can you do it with the players who finished out last season? No, I don't think so. There has to be some massive improvements to a few different areas, whether it be defensemen or forwards. And then you also have to have the players in your lineup have to perform better. They got rid of some key players and some popular players out of their lineup. We're watching one of them play right now, or if you're watching two of them play right now, right in the finals. But, you know, Carlo, Coyle, you know, guys like that, those are popular guys in the locker room. So replacing them is not easy, but that's something that they've, you know, they have a challenge now to make sure that they get good people in place and good players in place. And you know, let's face it, the group they had at the end of last season, you know, you can't move forward with that group. It has to be something better.
What do you think the biggest challenge will be for Sturm?
Well, I think it was important, first of all, for him to be named before the draft and before free agency starts. So draft coming up at the end of the month, free agency starts, I believe, July 1. So it's important for that piece to be there, so that if you're trying to bring free agents in, you've got your coach in place. You know, you're not a free agent coming in and you don't know who the coach is going to be. You know, that's tough to commit long term to a team and an organization that doesn't even have a coach yet. So that was important, first of all. But for his challenges, first of all, getting to know players. You know, he's been in the NHL a little bit as an assistant. Now it's been more in the American Hockey League. Getting to know his players, getting on the same page with some of the leaders. The leadership took a big hit with Brad Marchand going out the door. Let's face it. You know, and they've had good leadership here for several years. Now, who's going to be that leader? Who's going to be the guy that steps up? So I think establishing that leadership group, you have a pretty good idea who it's going to be, but establishing a good rapport with your leadership group, and then and getting everybody on the same page and quickly. I didn't like their training camp last year. I thought it was a little disjointed. They talked about that as well. Now they're moving forward, that they can learn from some of their mistakes possibly as they move forward. And I think that him getting to work, you know, right away is going to be so important because of where they finished last year. It was a huge disappointment.
Lastly, Bearsy, does it matter if he's played here at all to you?
No, I don't think so. You know, we've had coaches. How many coaches here in the last little while that they haven't played here? So I think it's good for him to know the city and be comfortable in the city, but I don't think it's overly important that he did play here. He had some good success here when he played, so that's a positive. But coaching's a whole different animal, right? And they've got a spot, I believe, to replace on the assistant coaches as well. So I talk about having a rapport with the players, but you also have to have a rapport with your assistants, whether the guys that are there stay in place or whether they make changes in that department. You know, that still remains to be seen.
Well, Bearsy, thanks for taking a few minutes out. I know you're busy. I know you got to hit them straight. So appreciate you taking a few minutes. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Roche. Appreciate it.